all of the northeastern states, and most of them were wearing the costumes and the dress of their state and their tribe within the region. So there were people from Nagaland, from Meghalaya, from Arunachal, from Mizoram, um, and Assam and Bengal, of course. And each, there were faculty members, there were students, there was the general public, there were writers, there were readers, um, and they were all sort of wearing their own dress and speaking their own language. So you could hear so many languages, many of which are small tribal languages of the Northeast, being spoken all around us. So it was truly a very diverse kind of a crowd and an experience. And later on, when we went to have food, um, I could see that so-called traditional Assamese food, you could have duck, you could have pork, you could have chicken, mutton, fish, and in some places, beef was also available as a delicacy. This is, of course, the holy month of Ramzan, which is going on currently. Also, the holy month of Lent for Christians. And it's also leading up to the Hindu festival of Holi, which is just next week in a few days. So people all over the country of different communities are observing different kinds of rituals and religious practices connected with their own community and their own group. I was also in Calcutta for a literature festival, and this time I went to visit some of the oldest synagogues and the largest synagogues in Asia, that is Jewish houses of prayers, which happen to be in Calcutta. And if you climb up to the roof of the oldest and biggest synagogue in Calcutta, called the Magen David, you can see from the rooftop, you can see a Gurudwara, you can see two different kinds of mosques, including one of Bori Muslims. You can see a Portuguese church, and you can see a variety of secular buildings, modern buildings, temples, etc. I was in Gwalior, and Gwalior is in Madhya Pradesh. It's very close to a number of very important Jain sites, which are very old. But it is also the home of the burial place of Tansen, who is supposed to have been the father of North Indian Hindustani music and was associated with the court of Akbar. And Tansen was born a Gaur Brahmin and is said to have been a disciple of Swami Haridas as well as of Sheikh Muhammad Ghaus. And it is the Sufi Muhammad Ghaus's tomb, and that's where you visit because next to him Tansen is buried. So there is a kind of double shrine, just like you have a double shrine in Delhi for Nizamuddin, Sheikh Nizamuddin Aulia, and for the poet and his disciple Amir Khusro. I was also in Jodhpur in Rajasthan, where the Mehrangarh fort is. And I was participating in a workshop where we were reading Rajasthani texts of bhakti literature. And one evening we had a performance by folk singers from Jodhpur. And they sang in Rajasthani, they sang Kabir, they sang Dadu, they sang Raidas, and they sang popular Sufi songs which are attributed to Khusro and so on. And it was a multilingual, in a sense, multi-religious performance which they were singing for us. Of course, coming here from Cochin Airport, from through Ernakulam, and then coming into Idukki district, all along the way, as you know, you see mosques, you see churches of all denominations, and you see restaurants and eating places with food from all parts of the south as well as the Middle East. Those seem to be the most popular eateries. Um, and finally, I was also in Kanpur and in Banaras. Um, Now, Kanpur, of course, is an important center for the anti-colonial struggle. So there's all kinds of historic sites in Kanpur. Banaras is an important Hindu pilgrimage site, of course, probably the most important Kashi in all of India, the holiest place, but it is also thoroughly integrated with the Muslim communities who live there, because they are the ones who actually are the weavers who make the gorgeous Banaras saris and textiles. They also provide all of the items that are required for Hindu worship, for example, in the big temples like the Kashi Vishwanath temple. There is a huge mosque right next to the temple called the Gyan Vapi, and an even bigger mosque built by Aurangzeb, which is further down the river. And there is a large Muslim community of Banarsi natives who speak the kind of Hindi that is spoken in Banaras. They speak, the very local kind of Hindi that is spoken there. Um, Now, we happened to be in Banaras at the it was Christmas Eve and Christmas. So, December 23, 24, 25, 26, we were in Banaras. And I was visiting a school, which is a rural school just outside Banaras for, poor children, which I know the people who run the school and I contribute sometimes to it. So they took me to see the school and they said, tomorrow the school will be closed because it's Christmas. And in the morning, there was an announcement in the newspaper and all over the press that the UP government had declared that there was no holiday. In fact, it was compulsory for schools to observe 25th December as the birth anniversary, 24th and 25th, as the birth anniversaries of Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya, who founded the Banaras Hindu University, and Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was a former Prime Minister of India. So all schools must observe both these occasions and remain open, and all children must go to school. And incidentally, it was also, I think, a Saturday, Sunday. But there was no holiday given. It was specifically cancelled and there was no mention made of Christmas. Now, I want to ask the question that when diversity, multi-religious, multicultural, multilingual life is something that you find literally in every corner of India. I've gone from Rajasthan to Assam, I've gone from UP, Madhya Pradesh, come down to Kerala, right? Just in the last few months, all the things that I'm describing to you, I've gone to Bengal, I also went up to Chandigarh, and so on and so on. I've also been to Bangalore. Everywhere you see that people are proud of their heritage, they own their identity, they practice their faith, they speak their language. Just like you're all here, this entire meeting will be in Malayalam. You publish books in Malayalam. You do all of your social service and your public activity in Malayalam. And all of you belong to diverse communities. I don't think that it's possible to say that all of you are Hindus or all of you are Muslims or anything like that. And I want to ask whether this is the reality of India and whether that reality is under threat, or whether this is the long term persisting reality which in the end will prevail, right? That people are tied to their own culture, their own language, their own region, their own food, their own dress, their own identity. And they will fight for their democratic right to express and practice everything that is involved in their own culture and their own sense of selfhood, right? Is that going to be what will ultimately prevail in India? Or is the other reality becoming increasingly dominant? Now, I believe the writer Arundhati Roy was recently in Kerala to release her new book and visit the school that her mother had set up, Mary Roy. And she gave a talk there where she said that, you know, in Kerala, we don't understand the danger to secular and multi religious India. Um, we don't understand it, but if you go north, you will see how much things have changed. And we have to be very careful, she said, to protect what we have here as a proud and long history of mixed living and toleration and interreligious contacts, engagement, and peaceful living in this part of the country. So she sounded a kind of alarm, and she said, you know, you people just are sheltered from the majoritarian right wing Hindu politics, which has completely overtaken many parts of the country, especially in the north. Um, Now, I think that there is some truth to what she said, and you know, she lives in Delhi, I live in Delhi, so we may share a very similar perspective on the dangers to the social fabric of this country, which is actually woven with many different threads of many different colors, as all of you know. Um, you know, what we have been seeing increasingly in the last 10, 12 years is that um, it is becoming difficult for minority communities to be themselves, to express themselves in any manner, whether through worship, whether through dress, whether through language, whether through their eating habits, whether through their forms of association. They are not allowed the space to be both Muslims and Indians, to be both Christians and Indians. And immediately, as soon as they sort of foreground their religious identity, minority communities, their Indianness is somehow challenged. And, you know, fingers are pointed at them saying that they are anti national, or that they are not, you know, loyal to this country, or that they are, in some sense, second class citizens in what is actually a Hindu nation, a Hindu Rashtra, right? And this is not just in terms of rhetoric and in terms of the public atmosphere of toxicity, of hate speech, of discrimination, of you know, certain kinds of provocative and incendiary speeches and social media and movies. You know, you might have, of course, Malayalam cinema is so rich and you know, so interesting and so far ahead that you may not be following, you know, Hindi cinema, but some of the big movies that have come out recently, including the Kerala Story, Kashmir Files, Chava, Dhurandhar, many super hit movies have been very markedly communal, um, anti-Muslim, Islamophobic. They have othered non-Hindus in a very stark way. Not only encounter and sometimes conflict between you know, using Pakistan very often as the sort of other, and insinuating that Muslims are, the enemy within, right? The other within the self that has to be somehow subdued or purged or removed from the body politic. Now, the most terrifying manifestation of this you see on the borders of the country. In states like Assam and Bengal, where they are bordering Bangladesh, or Kashmir, which of course is open on many sides and which is a Muslim majority state. Um, and in throughout the Northeast, which has, as I said, a lot of ethnic diversity, you see that there are repeated attempts, both by political leaders, to otherize Muslims as Bangladeshis, as intruders, to mark out the use of languages that Muslims speak, including Urdu and Bangla, um, to question the very citizenship of people who might be minorities, or who might have come during either the first partition or the second partition, that is to say, the foundation of Pakistan, the foundation of Bangladesh in 47 or in 71. Communities that might have come into India fleeing partition violence on both those occasions are even now being questioned as being not part of India and not integrated into India. And many times, even those in high office use a kind of divisive language which can only be called hate speech. And the laws have also been changed. For example, laws surrounding Waqf land. That is to say, taking away public buildings, sites of worship, sites of learning, universities, etc., from Muslim minority control and putting them under government ownership. In other words, taking away the power of the community to regulate, whether it is mosques or its dargahs or its madrasas, and so on. Um, Now, uh, I could go on sort of proliferating the examples, of this kind of anti-minority sentiment and discriminatory practices, which go from mob lynching, attacking individuals because they happen to be in the leather trade or in the meat trade, attacking individuals because of the kind of food they eat, which could include all kinds of meat, but specifically cow meat. The politics of cow eating is very vicious and virulent in the north. And but some governments, uh, led by the Hindu right, some state governments have made new kinds of declarations which are clearly anti-constitutional and illegal, right? Like, you can't serve non-vegetarian food in the vicinity of a school or in the vicinity of a temple. Non-Muslims will not be allowed to enter holy cities of the Hindus like Haridwar or Rishikesh. during celebrations like Holi, etc., Ram Navami, mosques should be covered with green tarpaulin so as not to make noise and cause offense to, Hindus who happen to be celebrating their festival. This kind of very, very targeted and offensive diktats often come down from the state government in states like UP, of course, Himachal Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Gujarat, of course, Assam, and you find that people are becoming afraid of, for example, wearing a topi or wearing, a burqa or a hijab. People feel that if they have to get jobs as domestic workers or as vendors and vegetable sellers and so on, they change their name. So they don't want to indicate that they are Muslim. So they just go by some sort of generic Hindu name. Um, uh, During the inauguration of the Ram temple in Ayodhya, you saw saffron flags which bore the legend Jai Shri Ram or a picture of Hanuman. You found them all vegetable sellers, fruit sellers, small shop owners, people with any kind of small business all over the north were basically carrying these flags on their little cart or their shop front or the top of the building, the houses where they lived, etc., as though to indicate that we do not present any threat, and you shouldn't even look towards us, to understand that we belong to the minority community or that we feel, threatened by this politics of majoritarianism. So people try to hide, people try to assimilate, people try not to speak their language. People move away if they can from Gujarat. There's been a huge exodus of Muslims after 2002. Um, and there are also other kinds of laws which apparently don't seem to be about um, your religious identity or your ethnicity or anything like that. But for example, laws governing age of consent for marriage, laws surrounding the possibility of having an interreligious marriage, which is purely a civil marriage and does not have any religious ceremony. You know, um, in Gujarat now they are making it compulsory for adult uh, men and women to have parental consent before they get married, right? And this is essentially meant to make it very difficult to have an interreligious marriage or an intercaste marriage, even, right? Um, so, in all these direct and indirect ways, you find that the rights of minorities for freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of living where they want to live, moving where they want to go. Muslims are not given jobs. They are not, given houses on rent. They are not able to buy and sell property very easily. In many parts of the country, this has become standard practice to segregate Muslims. So, in tribal areas, you find that Christian communities are targeted because there is an attempt to sort of spread the message of Ghar Vapsi, which means that if Dalits or tribal communities were converted to Christianity, then there is an attempt to bring them back through Shuddhi into the Hindu fold, right? There are entire campaigns against what is called love jihad, which is essentially interreligious marriage or relationships, and also against conversion in a very big way all over the country, where there are significant pockets of Christian populations. So this litany of problems that are on the rise, along with a very toxic, partisan, and prejudiced atmosphere which prevails in the media, in the popular culture through movies, in social media, most especially, and can sometimes erupt into mass violence, which is very, very harmful for vulnerable and marginal minority communities. The question now is a more subtle one than the question that we faced in 2014 or in 2019 or in 2024. Now, there is an electoral arithmetic through which it's clear that the Hindu right is able to form governments and win votes, right? And they may even campaign on issues which are genuinely meaningful for people, including roads and jobs and schools and infrastructure and agriculture and all the real things which affect real people in the world's largest population. However, uh, you see that despite having entered into now our third term of um, a, uh, a, an administration that essentially openly believes that India should rightfully be a Hindu nation and not a secular and multi-religious nation, regardless of what is enshrined in the constitution and what was propounded by our founders. An administration that does not stop at meddling with even a figure like Gandhi, when it suits them. Despite this, we do see that in many ways, the desire for self-expression and for democratic rights is something that can be found among people all over this country, belonging to all kinds of different caste communities and religious groups. And in the early years of the post-colonial republic, we used to believe that identity politics is somehow the enemy of national integration, because we were trying to build a country out of many big and small parts that remained after decolonization and independence, and we had gone through a very, very terrifying partition. But now that almost 80 years have passed and we have a very strong constitution and we have a reality, a lived reality of being the world's most diverse country, right? Is there hope, perhaps, that at a very micro level, through means that may not even present themselves on the political
അവരാരംഭിച്ചത് ഇന്നത്തെ ഇന്ത്യയിൽ പോലും ഏത് പ്രദേശത്ത് അത് മതപരമായ പ്രാധാന്യമുള്ള പ്രദേശമാണെങ്കിൽ പോലും അവിടെ പോയി കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ എല്ലാ മതവിഭാഗങ്ങളും അവിടെ ഒത്തുചേരുന്നത് കാണാം എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ടാണ്. ഭാഷാ വസ്ത്ര വൈവിധ്യം ഇന്ത്യയിലെ ഏത് പ്രദേശത്തിൻ്റെയും സഹജമായ സ്വഭാവവിശേഷമാണ്. ഉദാഹരണമായി കൽക്കട്ടയിലെ വളരെ പഴയ ജൂത സിനഗോഗ് കയറി ഉയരങ്ങളിലെത്തിയാൽ ചുറ്റുപാടും ഗുരുദ്വാരകളും മുസ്ലിം ക്രിസ്ത്യൻ പള്ളികളും ഹിന്ദു ക്ഷേത്രങ്ങളും കാണാനാവുന്നതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഇന്ത്യയുടെ ഏത് പ്രദേശത്തിനും ഈ ബഹുമത മുദ്രയുണ്ട്. ഇന്ത്യയിൽ ഹിന്ദു മുസ്ലിം ജീവിതം ഇടപിരിക്കാനാവാത്ത വിധത്തിൽ പരസ്പരം ചേർന്ന് കിടക്കുകയാണ്. സംഗീതം, ഭക്തി, സാഹിത്യം, സംസ്കാരം, ഭാഷ എന്നിവ പരസ്പരം പകർന്നും പങ്കുവച്ചും ജീവിച്ചവരാണ് ഇന്ത്യക്കാർ. ഒരുമിച്ചും ഇഴ ചേർന്നുമുള്ള ഈ സർവമത ജീവിതം ആരാധനാലയങ്ങൾക്കകത്തുപോലും എത്തിച്ചേരുന്നു. ഒരു മതവിഭാഗത്തിന് വേണ്ട ആരാധനാ ഉപാധികൾ മറ്റൊരു വിഭാഗം തയ്യാറാക്കുന്നത് സർവ്വസാധാരണമാണ്. ആരാധനാ കാര്യങ്ങളിൽ നിന്ന് സ്വാതന്ത്ര്യ സമരത്തിലേക്കും ഈ സാഹോദര്യം അക്കാലത്ത് പടർന്നു കയറിയിരുന്നു. മതവൈവിധ്യം, സാംസ്കാരിക വൈവിധ്യം, ഭാഷാ വൈവിധ്യം, ഭക്ഷണ വൈവിധ്യം എന്നിവ ചേർന്നതാണ് ഇന്ത്യ എന്ന യാഥാർത്ഥ്യം. ഇപ്പോഴത്തെ ചോദ്യം ഈ യാഥാർത്ഥ്യം ഇന്ത്യയിൽ നിലനിൽക്കുമോ എന്നുള്ളതാണ്. ഇന്ത്യയിൽ ന്യൂനപക്ഷങ്ങൾക്ക് അവരായിരിക്കാൻ, അവരുടെ സ്വത്വം നിലനിർത്താൻ ഉള്ള അവകാശം ചോദ്യം ചെയ്യപ്പെടും. നിങ്ങൾ ന്യൂനപക്ഷ വിഭാഗത്തിൽ പെട്ടവരാണെങ്കിൽ, നിങ്ങൾ ന്യൂനപക്ഷ സ്വത്വം ഉയർത്തിപ്പിടിക്കുന്നുവെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങളുടെ പൗരത്വവും അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇന്ത്യക്കാരൻ, ഇന്ത്യക്കാരി എന്ന പദവി ചോദ്യം ചെയ്യപ്പെടുന്ന സാഹചര്യം ഇന്ത്യയുടെ പല ഭാഗത്തുമുണ്ട്. മാധ്യമങ്ങൾ, സിനിമകൾ തുടങ്ങി സർവ്വവ്യവഹാരങ്ങളും വേർതിരിവിൻ്റെയും സംഘർഷത്തിൻ്റെയും പൊരുത്തക്കേടിൻ്റെയും സൂചനകൾ ബോധപൂർവം സൃഷ്ടിച്ചെടുക്കും. പാകിസ്ഥാനെ ശത്രുരാജ്യമായി ചൂണ്ടിക്കാണിച്ച് അതിൻ്റെ ഭാഗമായി മുസ്ലിങ്ങളെ ആഭ്യന്തര ശത്രുക്കളായി ചൂണ്ടിക്കാണിക്കുന്ന പ്രവണത മാധ്യമരംഗത്ത് സജീവമാണ്. മുസ്ലിങ്ങളെ അന്യവൽക്കരിക്കുന്നു. മുസ്ലിങ്ങൾ സംസാരിക്കുന്ന ഭാഷ, ഭക്ഷണം, വേഷം എന്നിവ ഇതിനായിട്ട് ഉപയോഗിക്കപ്പെടുന്നു. വെറുപ്പിൻ്റെ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ വിഭജനത്തിൻ്റെ ഭാഷ കൂടുതൽ വ്യാപകമാവുന്നു. ഭക്ഷണ രാഷ്ട്രീയം മറ്റൊരു വിഷയമാണ്. ബീഫ് കഴിക്കുന്നതുമായി ബന്ധപ്പെട്ട് ഭരണഘടനാ വിരുദ്ധ തീരുമാനങ്ങൾ പല സംസ്ഥാനങ്ങളും കൈക്കൊള്ളുന്നു. ഹിന്ദു മുസ്ലിം ജീവിതങ്ങളെ പ്രത്യക്ഷമായി അകറ്റി നിർത്താനുതകുന്ന നിയമങ്ങൾ, അതും ഭരണഘടനാ വിരുദ്ധമായ നിയമങ്ങൾ ഉത്തർപ്രദേശ്, ഹിമാചൽ പ്രദേശ്, മധ്യപ്രദേശ്, ഗുജറാത്ത്, രാജസ്ഥാൻ, അസം എന്നിവിടങ്ങളിൽ നിലവിൽ വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്. പേര് പോലും മാറ്റി പറഞ്ഞ് സാധാരണ ഹിന്ദു പേരുകൾ ഉപയോഗിച്ച് ജീവിക്കേണ്ടി വരുന്ന അവസ്ഥ രാജ്യത്ത് വ്യാപകമാണ്. രാമജന്മഭൂമിയിലെ പ്രതിഷ്ഠാ സമയത്ത് ഭയചകിതരായിട്ടുള്ള ന്യൂനപക്ഷങ്ങൾ ആ പ്രതിഷ്ഠയെ പ്രകീർത്തിക്കുന്ന ബാഡ്ജുകളും പോസ്റ്ററുകളും തങ്ങളുടെ വാഹനങ്ങളിലും കച്ചവട സ്ഥാപനങ്ങളിലും പ്രദർശിപ്പിക്കേണ്ടി വന്നു എന്നത് ഓർക്കേണ്ടതാണ്. ഗുജറാത്തിൽ പ്രായപൂർത്തിയായവർക്ക് വിവാഹം കഴിക്കാൻ മാതാപിതാക്കളുടെ സമ്മതം വേണം എന്ന പുതിയ നിബന്ധന മിശ്ര വിവാഹം ഒഴിവാക്കുക എന്ന ഉദ്ദേശത്തോടുകൂടി സൃഷ്ടിച്ചെടുത്തതാണ്. ആദിവാസി മേഖലയിൽ ഇതേ രീതിയിൽ ക്രിസ്ത്യൻ മതവിഭാഗങ്ങൾ ഇരയാക്കപ്പെടുന്നു. ഘർ വാപസി, ലവ് ജിഹാദ് തുടങ്ങിയ കാര്യങ്ങൾ കേരളത്തിൽ കൂടുതൽ വിശദീകരിക്കേണ്ട കാര്യമില്ല. പ്രശ്നസങ്കീർണവും വിഷലിപ്തവും വിഭജന അക്രമ സ്വഭാവമുള്ളതുമായിട്ടുള്ള സംഭവങ്ങൾ രാജ്യത്ത് വർദ്ധിച്ചു വരുന്നു. കൃഷി, കച്ചവടം, വിവിധതര വ്യവസായങ്ങൾ, സേവന പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങൾ എന്നിവയിലൂടെ ഉപജീവനം കണ്ടെത്തുന്ന ന്യൂനപക്ഷങ്ങൾ അത്തരം മേഖലകളിൽ നിന്ന് പുറത്താക്കപ്പെടുന്നു. എന്തിനേറെ പറയുന്നു, ഗാന്ധിജി പോലും വെറുപ്പിൻ്റെ ഇരയായി മാറുന്നു. പല സംസ്കാരങ്ങൾ ചേർന്ന ഇന്ത്യ സൂക്ഷ്മതലത്തിൽ അന്തസ്സാർന്ന ജീവിതം നൽകാൻ ഭരണകൂടത്തിന് സാധിക്കുന്നില്ല. സർക്കാർ ജനങ്ങളുടെ ശത്രുവായി മാറുന്ന സാഹചര്യം പല സംസ്ഥാനങ്ങളിലും ഉണ്ടായി വരുന്നു. നാം ജനിച്ചു വളർന്ന ഇന്ത്യ ഇല്ലാതാവുകയാണോ എന്ന ചോദ്യം ഉയർന്നു വരികയാണ്. പക്ഷേ അത്തരത്തിലുള്ള നിരാശാജനകമായ ഒരു വിഷയത്തിൽ ഊന്നി നിന്നുകൊണ്ട് ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ പ്രഭാഷണം അവസാനിപ്പിക്കാൻ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നില്ല. നമ്മൾ ഈ രാജ്യത്ത് യാത്ര ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ വിവിധ മതവിഭാഗങ്ങൾ ഒരുമിച്ച് ചേരുന്നതിൻ്റെ പ്രത്യാശാജനകമായ അനുഭവങ്ങൾ നമുക്ക് ധാരാളമായി ലഭിക്കുന്നു. അതിന് മകുടോദാഹരണമാണ് കേരളം. വിവിധ വിഭാഗങ്ങൾ ഒരുമിച്ച് ചേർന്ന് ജീവിക്കുന്നതിൻ്റെ അതിശക്തമായ സാമൂഹ്യ ഘടന രൂപീകരിച്ചെടുത്തതിൻ്റെ ദീർഘമായ ചരിത്രം കേരളത്തിനുണ്ട്. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ പ്രത്യാശയ്ക്ക് ഇനിയും വകയുണ്ട്. ഞാനവിടെ വന്നപ്പോൾ നിങ്ങളുടെ മുദ്രാവാക്യം ശാസ്ത്രം സാമൂഹ്യ വിപ്ലവത്തിന് എന്ന മുദ്രാവാക്യം ശ്രദ്ധയോടെ പഠിക്കുകയുണ്ടായി. തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും ഇന്ത്യക്കാകെ വഴികാട്ടിയായ മുദ്രാവാക്യമാണത്. ഒരു ബഹുസംസ്കാര രാജ്യമായ ഇന്ത്യ നിലനിൽക്കേണ്ടത് ഇത്തരം മുദ്രാവാക്യങ്ങളിലൂടെയും ഇത്തരം സംഘടനകളുടെ പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങളിലൂടെയുമാണ്. നന്ദി.
I've received some questions in English. If you have questions in Malayalam, you can write them and send them to anybody on the stage and they'll translate them and tell me. So don't hesitate if you have questions in Malayalam. So the questions here are, extreme nationalism is often defined as Hinduism. Is there any justification for this argument? I don't think, I think there's an association of the ideology of Hindutva or Hindu nationalism with extreme nationalism, majoritarian nationalism. I don't think Hinduism is a correct way to think about this, because Hinduism is the name that we give to, a type of religion which is practiced by the majority of people in this country. But Hindu nationalism, like right-wing nationalism or extreme neo-nationalism in many parts of the world, has given itself a religious color. So in America now you have Christian nationalism. The very identity of the Indian nation, which is governed by its constitution and by its egalitarian principles, where there is equality of equal respect for all religions and equidistance from all religions as far as state policy is concerned. So I don't think that there is any justification for this kind of a confusion between Hinduism, extreme nationalism, and state ideology. The second question is that this question of parental consent to marriage, even between consenting adults, in Gujarat is something that the government is trying to implement. And is it anti-constitutional? Yes, I believe it is against the constitution. And why is there no public interest litigation raised in this context? I think there will be a resistance to it. There will be people will file cases to try and stop this kind of a law from coming into place. And it will be something that will have to be fought out in the courts. I don't think that it can be simply dictated by the state government, because once a state government sets a bad precedent, then other states may try to imitate that, and that's not something that because it makes a mockery of the age of consent. I mean, after all, what does it mean? Age of consent is that you're old enough to decide who you want to marry, and how you want to live your life. So there's no question of taking away that right from non-minors, from those who have attained the age of majority, where they're allowed to decide, how they want to lead their personal life. Um, this is something about textbooks and how textbooks and syllabi are being changed, um, including removal or sort of minimizing, for example, Mughal rule, the chapters on Mughal rule, removing them entirely from school textbooks, from college syllabi, from any kind of history that students study. Um, more recently, there's been a bid to sort of render the national anthem as a secondary song relative to Vande Mataram, which is a song which is also associated with the nationalist movement and anti-colonial struggle, but has a much more Hindu character, and comes out of early Hindu nationalism, rather than the kind of Tagorean secular ethic which lies behind the national anthem. So the question is that why is the Supreme Court not challenging these kinds of attempts by the government, whether to change our school and college syllabi, to change what is taught as our history in schools and colleges, to children as well as to university students, and to tamper with our national symbols like the national anthem. Why is the Supreme Court not taking cognizance? I don't know the answer. That in the past, perhaps we have had a much more activist court, which has intervened more strongly in these kinds of issues, and which has seen itself as one of the pillars to guard against, majoritarianism, one of the pillars of democracy. But like other pillars of our democracy, including the parliament, including a free press, including a robust media, including the courts themselves, there has been a kind of retreat from the active role that these different arms of our public life are supposed to play in safeguarding democratic norms and constitutional rights. I think that's generally been the tendency and the trend. Everything has been overpowered by the government itself, and the opposition has not succeeded in restoring the power of the media, the power of the courts, to fight back against this sort of governmental overreach. That is something that is a real problem. So then one question is science the last resort? Or can science be a contributory factor towards social revolution, and there should be other means as well for social revolution? Of course, I think it's not the last resort. I think, primary means have to be education, people's empowerment, political and civic discourse and activism, and people learning to take seriously their rights and responsibilities as equal citizens of a democratic republic. Um, so science is one way to help people think rationally, to help people, understand what kinds of challenges they are facing in politics and in public life. It has always been a vehicle for social enlightenment and for a kind of modernization of any society. And certainly science should not be allowed to become reactionary. You see many new sort of ways in which science also is being co-opted into the agenda of the Hindu right, to try and bring back essentially unscientific ideas and discourses in the name of indigenous science, ancient science, and other kinds of these ideas about our native knowledge, etc. Oh my God, there's many more questions, so I better keep it short. Yeah, yeah. Um, So, if the government of India is deliberately trying to convert India into a Hindu Rashtra, what can we do to preserve our diversity? That is, of course, the big question. That is the main question which faces all of us who believe in India's secular character. Um, what is your opinion regarding Kerala story? Um, it's against Kerala culture and civilization. Um, yes, I think this kind of propaganda cinema, propaganda films, um, and highly partisan and motivated movies should be rejected by the public. They should be possibly even challenged in court for misrepresenting the lived realities of people in places like Kerala or Kashmir or what have you. So I think this is a very unfortunate development that the government now has its own sort of filmmakers, people who are ideologically motivated to put out certain kinds of propaganda and vitiate the culture and entertainment industry and the media and movie industry in this very, very brazen manner. Um, Do you think that Kerala's social structure can serve as a model for the rest of India and other states? Um, and how is that to be made possible? Yes, I think there are many great things about Kerala. Um, Mainly, its long history of social, religious, and cultural diversity. Its huge traditions of knowledge and of texts in Malayalam, in Sanskrit, in Manipravalam, in the ability of Malayalis also to understand and speak other languages of the region, the involvement of people from the state in a very major way in the national movement, in the freedom struggle, the presence of great social reformers like Sri Narayana Guru and so many others. The fact that national leaders like Gandhi and Nehru came here and had something to say about the society and social and political struggle here. I think Kerala is quite exemplary. It has also a very long left tradition, a tradition of struggle for the rights of workers and peasants and so on. And it has retained its It's exceptional character. Of course, it's also very highly developed. It has high rates of female literacy and so on. That doesn't mean that there are no social problems in Kerala. Uh, apply the Kerala model, to the rest of the country because historical conditions may be very, very different. You cannot simply match rest of the country may have a hard time catching up with Kerala, but I think Kerala has a lot to be proud of. And as Arundhati Roy said, it should work very hard to protect what it has managed to preserve by way of its commitment to pluralism. I think that's a very important thing for Kerala. Um, I'm sorry, okay, we have 15 minutes still. Um, This is a question about just exactly related to my book, Righteous Republic. Um, and it says that every tradition that has a long and robust life must at some point face an epistemological crisis. And this is what happened to the tradition of Indian science. This is something I've argued in my book. And somebody has asked, can you please explain the reason behind it? Is there an effort being taken to regain our science tradition? Now, I think this is a very interesting debate actually about what is happening to this idea of Indian science. On the one hand, you have this huge push from the government in the new education policy to revitalize what they call Indian knowledge systems. You have also noticed that in IITs and ISERs and other institutions of higher education and research in the sciences, there is some attempt to look at uh, traditions of scientific inquiry, mathematics, technology, things that range from shipbuilding to medicine to health to yoga, right? To try and recast um, indigenous knowledge systems and uh, uh, practices, you could say, as representing Indian science over a very long period of time. Starting with, Aryabhatta and Panini and, what have you, and coming up to the great space scientists and atomic scientists and nuclear scientists and doctors and engineers of modern India, right? Now, the question about that line that you can draw from a very deep past to the present and the future is a difficult one. And it requires, careful scholarly study. Um, yes, there was mathematics in ancient India. Yes, there was astronomy, there was astrology, there was Ayurveda, there was, all kinds of physical, bodily, physiological, practices of the mind-body complex under a broad rubric like yoga. But if you actually study the texts in many languages that exist, you will find that um, they may or may not be a foundation in what are called the principles of modern science, right? So, yes, it's a way to approach the world, it's a way to connect the human body and the human mind with the natural and the physical environment. It's a way to build things, to make things, to fix things, to invent things. But does that make it the same as modern science with physics as its basis? I don't think it does in many cases. And all of the great Indian scientists of the 20th and 21st century, I think, understand this and know this. You know, that doesn't mean that you know, you shouldn't go and read ancient texts. But to try and prove that those texts demonstrate our ability to undertake stem cell research or plastic surgery or space travel or, you know, nuclear war, you know, 5,000 years ago is not correct. It is simply a new kind of mythology, and it misleads the public, right? And it prevents us from doing what we actually need to do, which is educate children to think logically, to think rationally, to be able to judge, to be able to criticize, to be able to make up their own minds, and to be reasonable and respectful citizens. So, in a sense, we should look very carefully at what passes for science in this kind of a Hindu right vision of, you know, the highly developed state of pre-modern and ancient India, you know, before the coming of all kinds of outsiders, so to speak, to the subcontinent. Is communalization a global phenomenon? Yes. Yes, it is. I think right-wing politics is on the ascent everywhere. Populism, authoritarianism, fascism, you could say, extreme religious nationalism is a global phenomenon, and all of the world's leading democracies are currently in its grip. So it's not just India alone. In a way, India is like a trendsetter, you know, because the problems that America has seen in 2025, you know, we've been experiencing since 2014. The speed with which American universities, for example, have been attacked and destroyed from within, it's a very slow and gradual process in this country for our institutions of higher learning. So yes, it is a global phenomenon, and it has to be considered in that way. So we shouldn't think that we will either escape or that we can stop fighting, you know, to protect what is special and particular about India. I think that the most important thing to see in India is that the experience of uh, living among others and living with difference and how to manage difference is historically very old. Mechanisms for the world and for India to have a gateway to the rest of the civilized world in antiquity, you know, these are not things to take lightly. These are traditions that we have to build on and that we have to consolidate in a time when they are in danger. Um, Something about unprecedented India-Israel relations. Yes, you know, I think I think the truth of this global rise and spread of right-wing politics all over Europe, all over, certainly in the United States and in democracies in Asia like Turkey, like India, like Israel, and so on. I think I think one of the ways in which this entire system is consolidating itself and is strengthening itself is because such regimes imitate and support one another, right? And they have to do that because it helps them to profit, of course, but also to consolidate their legitimacy and to form new kinds of alliances, right? To break down what were alliances between socialist countries or alliances between liberal, alliances between those engaged in a common struggle against colonialism and so on. This is the new face of empire. So, this government is trying to move us away from the kind of foreign policy that, was put in place at the time of Jawaharlal Nehru and continued more or less until, the early 2000s, where India was looking to provide moral leadership, build bridges with other third world and developing nation and global south countries. India was looking to think about South Asia as a region which could have a lot of cooperation within the South countries. Looking to China to end hostilities and find ways of moving forward as two Asian great powers. Balance between always the different poles of a multipolar world. That world itself has disappeared. So India has to find its way in this new world order that is emerging. That is extremely difficult, I think, for India. And we are not necessarily making great progress in building new relationships because often we are prioritizing, narrow interest over, principles of world peace and the equality of all peoples. So that's very unfortunate, but I think that is what is happening, and that should be part of our, efforts to resist, not full to our own people, but also those that, do damage to the kind of role that India has always tried to play in the world after the Second World War, where India has always stood by people who were continuing anti-colonial and anti-imperial struggles, and has always supported, smaller populations, smaller countries that were resisting empire in all its forms. That's what India did until recently. Um, I think the larger point remains that, the sway of Hindu nationalism and the rise of Hindu majoritarianism is something that a place like Kerala is ideally suited to resist and must and should resist. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. And now let me invite our next partner, Guru Mayor, Professor at University, to come to the stage.
We are privileged to have Professor Gautam Menon. As teacher just mentioned, he is a professor of biology and physics at Ashoka University, Sonipat. Now, on behalf of KSSP, I request Meera teacher to hand over our token of appreciation, a piece of decorative pottery made by our women workers of Integrated Rural Technology Center, an institution owned by KSSP.